Practice is how you learn. And my grandfather would always say, hey, you know, nothing worthwhile is free. And that's what he meant. You got to put your time in if you really want to. If you want to do something you love, you better be willing to put the time in. Because no one can do it for you. No one can learn something for you. You have to be the one who learns it yourself. And that's the fun part, you know. It's, you know, for me, you know, is I like to draw. So, and I think some of the best artists, the ones that I've met and that I admire, they're constantly learning. They're constantly trying to improve. They're constantly challenging themselves. And I know some other people that work in the arts that haven't challenged themselves, and they've been dialing it in for the last 15 years. And they live very comfortably, and they may think that's all they need to do, and that's fine. But the ones and the people that I enjoy the most are the ones that are constantly, you know, changing. They're better now than they were 3 years ago. They're going to be better 3 years from now. Because they're always challenging themselves. They're always trying to get to that next level. They're always trying to say something with their work that touches the viewer, to let them understand how it is that they felt in the moment. What was their impression of a landscape? What was the character of someone's face? What was the scene that they were trying to create? You know, everyone's got something they're trying to do, and the more effectively you do it, the better you're going to be. And so there's certain people that paint the same paintings over and over and over again, and that's because they know they'll sell them. That may be fine for them, but again, the artists that I really admire, that I admire the most, are constantly pushing themselves, experimenting, and trying to get better every day. You know, and that's a process, and that's what having a life's time of work is about for an artist, is, you know, trying to say something new with themes that have been around for many, many, many years. And so how do you do that? And that's the challenge. And yet there are themes that we all share, and so usually you're communicating we can communicate the most with familiar themes. We all experience happiness, we all experience sadness, we all experience, you know, hunger and the need to sustain ourselves through food and drink and that sort of thing. And of course we have family, and there's the life cycle, and all these different things that are commonalities among all of the people in our family, in the human family. And you could even extend it out, of course, to the the mammal kingdom and stuff. But we're actually usually we're doing our artwork not for, you know, other species, but for our own sort of thing. So but anyways, so keep on keeping on, I guess. Keep practicing, keep trying to work on this cylinder with me, you know, practice and draw outside of the class. These are just basic concepts where they're important concepts, but they are very, very basic. And so we're going to, what's the word I'm looking for? We want to learn them so that we can apply them, and they apply to everything we do, no matter how simple or how intermediate or how advanced. Form shadows are always something that are in play if we're dealing with representationalism, realism, where we're trying to give a nod to the physics of the way light is affected as it travels across a surface. That's what realists have been doing for hundreds of years. And then, of course, allegories and stories that are of the the people in the light, the things that are in the light. What are they experiencing? We turn the lights out, we don't know because we can't see anything, but we're always using the idea of light traveling across the surface. And even people that are using abstraction and things like that, or even non-objective, people will talk about what's called a collage space. And then what that means is that instead of dealing with a much deeper three-dimensional space, you're using a much more shallow space, but you're still dealing with light, medium, and darks, and light, medium darks, and dark, medium darks, and definite darks, and blacks, and values that are up towards the lighter end of the scale, and values that are up towards the deeper end of the scale. And so no matter what you're doing, whether you're dealing with representationalism, surrealism, neoclassicism, or neo-modern or something like that, a lot of artists work with value. They may not, if I look at Jackson Pollock, he's not necessarily trying to emulate the subtlety of light traveling across the rim of a tea cup or tea glass, but he is using dark, medium, and light, and everything in between, all kinds of values, to create patterns with those spatters that he makes, and to create certain patterns that, in some cases, they are patterns of classical works of art. In other ones, they are patterns that emulate, the constellations of the sky and things like that. So or the patterns of a rusty old truck. If you've ever seen even a realist paint a rusty old truck, there's an abstract quality to it, to be sure. So no matter what we're doing, these concepts are always applying. Now, while I've been chatting away at you, I've been using this 4B pencil. I'm using it very lightly because, again, it gets really dark very quickly. And I've been using I went from using sort of a little bit of an elbow swing, but then I didn't have enough control. So then I went to a finger swing, a regular back and forth finger swing, and then as I'm getting more control, now I'm actually trying to get where I'm using just on the downstroke. So we're using that feathered or tapered stroke. And what I'm trying to do is I'm putting the value of the entire shadow family, and I'm going to change my pencil now that I've been working with that. I'm going to go to an HB. But the reflected light, which is the lightest in the shadows, is still a shadow value. And my shadows are supposed to be darker than anything in the light, especially these light values, light gray, baby blue. So this is supposed to be darker than this. This is supposed to be darker than that. Now that's cast shadow, so that's supposed to be darker than this. So I'm trying to get the relationship, or the key, as some people will say. You'll hear people talk about keying in every once in a while, keying in a drawing or keying in a painting. And all that means is that they're relating the values one to the other. What's your lightest light? What's your darkest dark? This will be my darkest dark. Somewhere on here will be my lightest light, and everything else will fall in between. And so that's my key. And so as you're creating a drawing, try to think about more and more, when you boil it down, is really just what are the relationships? What kind of relationships are we talking about? How dark are those relationships? So a good example of this would be Rembrandt, who painted very, very dark paintings. They looked like, if you can think of a stage and someone shining a spotlight into the darkness. So very, very, very dark, except where it's falling on the person's face in that spotlight. Now again, I've got an HB pencil. I'm using this as I'm chatting you up. I'm using the gradated stroke, and I'm just trying to fill in some of this some of these patchy areas, because that 4B is a little harder to control than an HB. And so I'm going to layer. I'm layering this to get more uniformity. And again, what I'm trying to create or establish is the lightest value in the shadows. So this will be the lightest in those shadows. And so it's got to be dark enough for it to read like it's still a shadow. So where this hits this wall, or where it, where this comes together against the wall, this is the darker edge. I say whenever you have what we normally would think of as a line, that's two edges coming together. So one edge goes darker, which is this one, another edge goes lighter, which is that one. So that's what we're doing right now. We're creating these wonderful edges for our drawing. Okay, so we're going to keep doing that. We're going to keep working on this area. And I'm still using my finger swing. I'm using this HB pencil. As I'm dealing with this HB pencil, I'm going to start to see if I can just very gently, it'll go just slightly darker against this edge, and then on top it'll be lighter, and that'll create the edge that we want. So I was just trying to, and at some point I have to clean this up with an eraser up here. I don't think I'll do that just yet. But now I'm actually going to start to create a gradation, getting darker here, going lighter as it goes down, because this reflected light is not only the lightest on the edge, but it should be lighter here than it is up here, and this should be the middle value. And so I'm just spending a little more time at the top, and then I'm coming down in the middle area, and then I'm trying to spend very little time down here so that it will start to look like, I need to go down here right now because it's getting a little splotchy. But by doing this, I can start to get a gradation from here to here. Now that was the B pencil. I think I'm going to grab a 2H because I've got all these little stars or what have you. The texture, that's what I'm calling these little stars, these little specks, these little light specks of value. And remember, this is a lighter pencil, but it's making that value darker. And I have to use this very, very lightly, because if I use too much pressure with these hard pencils, the softer pencils won't stick to the value. So I have to use them very, very lightly. You might ask, well, why would that be? Well, all the pencils have a slightly different configuration, how they make it. Basically, there's more and more clay that is added to the graphite, and so that makes the H pencils harder. Well, that same clay, if you press down really hard, fills up all the little texture in the paper will fill up with this graphite. And graphite is also it's an industrial, it's not a fluid, obviously, it's dry, but it's an industrial, lubricant. It makes things, slicker. Even, and so anyone who's ever maybe raced Pinewood Derby cars or something knows you put it on the little tire axles of the tire, and the tires will go quicker because of the fact that graphite has that unique quality that it's very slick, so it helps things move over its slick surface. Well, we don't want that. We need to be able to build on our graphite, and so what we'll do is we just use this very lightly. As long as we use it lightly, we could use this all day long, and my other pencils will stick to it. If I press too hard, they won't. And so I'm using very little pressure. Like if I usually I'll touch people on their hand in my class just to kind of give them an idea of the pressure, and it's just a little bit firmer than the lightest, a very light touch on somebody's hand. So you sometimes feel like it's just barely more noticeable than a ladybug crawling on you. I mean, we want that kind of light pressure. The moment you start cranking on stuff is you're going to kill your drawing. So I'm getting a little bit of a gradation. That's what I wanted. I'm going to ditch the 2H now and come back to the 4B, because now we're going to deal with the core shadow. So this is all the shadow family. And along this area, we're going to have our core shadow. And now I've got my 4B pencil, and actually I'm using moderate pressure now. I could also build this up by staying here a little longer, which I will do some of that, but I'm just using a little bit heavier pressure than I was just a moment ago. But I got to be careful. I'm not cranking on this. Again, if you start cranking on this, game over. It'll fill in, the whole paper will fill in, it'll start getting really shiny. It'll be hard to see the darks. The darks will start looking lighter because of the fact that they're getting all shiny. And we're going to try to start building up our gradation from here going over to there. And, this should be darker here than it is down here, so that we're going to use these gradations, but they're going to be a little different. They're going to be a little lighter down here going across that surface. Where we come over here, it should be a little darker. Start at the darkest part, and I'm coming out, and I'm using a finger swing. I'm using a 4B pencil. I'm working on this area with a 4B pencil. I'm starting at the darkest part, coming out a little ways, starting at the darkest part, coming out a little ways, starting at the darkest part, coming out a little ways. And again, we're just barely starting to get a gradation over here. And that's what we're looking for. Looking for this, again, I'm going to come here to the middle. I don't want to work out here. I want to work here towards the highest density, if you will, so that I already have a gradation there happening, and I don't want to ruin that. If I came right to this edge and started darkening that, I'd make it into a line. We want this to be a soft, what looks to be a core shadow wrapping around this object. And again, it's the darkest is the core shadow. And then from the core shadow, we have a gradation into the middle values. And then it gets lighter on the edge into the reflected light. And right now I can't see that just yet, that the reflected light is not lighter yet. So I'm going to have to continue to build this up until we do have a little bit of reflected light there on the end. It's getting there, but it's not quite there yet. So again, we're gonna keep working on this to get this illusion. Now, if I felt like there's some serious texture going on here in this paper, again, this paper seems like it had a little. It's from a pad, and if pads are left, if they're moved around a lot, the paper kind of, grinds against itself like that, and it's not good for the paper. And so I think that's what's happened here, because it's just, we got all this sort of, there's a little bit of annoying differences with the texture of the paper. Like maybe it's just been a little, roughed up a little bit, and that's not good for making values. So again, I'm just going to continue to start at the darkest part, come out a little bit, start at the darkest part, come out a little further, start at the darkest part, come out a little further. Again, I'm using a downstroke, I'm using the tapered stroke. I'm doing all that good stuff we've talked about. And again, remember that the darkest parts are the ones we have that are going to take us the longest. So I've been using this 4B pencil. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump up to a 4H. We're going to do the same thing we did with our grayscale. We need to build this up. So I'm starting with my 4H pencil, and I'm putting a layer over this entire area. And then I'm going to go ahead and just start making my gradation using this 4H pencil. And again, it'll start to get a little darker again because it's filling in those little spots. It's filling in those little stars, sometimes I'll call them, and that's the texture of the paper. Sometimes people are like, well, if it's so much to fill that in, why aren't we using like smooth paper? That way we wouldn't have to fill in any texture. Well, that's true, but graphite needs to build on itself to get darker. There has to be texture for the graphite to actually get dark. So if I actually use smooth paper, and I use all the same pencils and try to do everything the same and went through the same process, my drawing would be 80% lighter. No, pardon me, not 80%, 20% lighter. So it would be a noticeable difference. My darks wouldn't be as dark. And that's because we need the texture to build up our values. So we're going to continue on here, starting at the darkest part, coming out, start at the darkest part, coming out, start at the darkest part, coming out. And again, I'm using this 4H pencil. And again, we're starting to get a little bit of this, of what we need happening here. I'm now going to grab a 2H pencil. I'm going to do the same thing that I did with the 4H. I'm going to try to cover most all the area with this 2H pencil. I'm using it very lightly, because again, if I use this one too heavy, my pencils won't stick to, the other softer pencils won't stick to the graphite. So very softly, very gently, again, I'm going to go ahead and make some gradations. And so I'm trying to cover most all this area. I'm going to take out that little lighter line very carefully with my 2H. There, it's gone. So again, we're just going to go ahead and again we're layering this. We're layering all our different pencils, and by doing this, we actually get more depth. So now I'm going to put down my 2H pencil. I'm going to grab my HB. There we go. Same old, same old. We're going to go over the whole area thereabouts, using this pencil. And you see how this is now, as this has gone darker, this starts to look lighter. Again, these relationships really are important. I'm not making this up. And it's the fun part of drawing. It's the amazing part to me. That this is where the magic starts to happen, as people like to say. Where, through all this layering and through all this planning. And the other thing I tell people is work your plan. In the beginning, we can really, self-doubt can be very destructive to what we're trying to do. And too much self-doubt will make you quit trying to draw. Well, we don't want that. So many times the drawing goes through phases. And my old professor used to talk about this. He would say, look, you're either bringing a drawing to life or you're killing it. And that when you're making a drawing, it'll always go through that life cycle. Sometimes it's coming alive, and sometimes it's not. And you want to stop when you're bringing it back to life, the point where, because again, it's going to be times where you're killing it, and sometimes you're bringing it back to life. So I've used my HB. We're going to grab our 2B and do the same thing. But sometimes I like the analogy. Some people can relate when you're cleaning if you're going to clean your garage, or you're going to clean your room, or you're going to clean your workshop, or whatever the area is in your house, where you're like, man, that thing needs some attention. But usually, going in, it's going to have to get uglier before it gets better. You have to pull stuff out to then begin to organize it. It's going to get uglier before it gets better. And the drawing, with your drawing, it's going to go through that phase too, where to get it to look nice, it's going to have to go through an ugly phase. Right now, I'm kind of in an ugly phase, and that's okay, because I'm going to continue to work my plan. Oh, I'm going to darken this. This will stay lighter. Darken this. Continue to work your plan. I tell people, look, usually people in some art classes, they always love to use the word, yeah, you're overworking. You're overworking it. You're overworking it. Most times, people aren't overworking it. They're just not working it enough. They haven't got to the point where it makes sense. Where all the different form shadows are reading, and all of a sudden the lights come on. So I did that everywhere with the 2B. Now I'm coming back to my 4B, and this is the fun part, is once I've layered all those pencils, even by using the same pressure, the 4B is all of a sudden making darker marks. It's by getting used to this layering method. All of a sudden you're going to get just richer darks. You're going to have a much better range of gradations, and it's going to really help the drawing. We want that. That's going to be really great for us to. That's not a bad thing, believe me. It's going to really be advantageous to your drawing. So that's what we're doing. We're going to go ahead and continue to build up certain areas on this drawing. Now I'm almost done with the shadows. The shadows takes the most time, because we have to go over it, and over it so many times to get this to work. And so again, we've got this where this is looking like, coarse shadow, dark tone, reflected light, or dark, medium, and light. That's what we want. That's what we need in order for this to look right. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and a little bit more through here. Okay, now we're going to work on the lights. And we're going to start with my HB, maybe my 2B a little bit. So I'm going to work on the dark middle values. Now right about here, I'm going to have my light tones. Okay, so that means this is going to be dark middle value and light middle value. Okay, so I'm already trying to kind of map out in my brain what I'm going to need to be doing. Now, see if I can, nope, not enough control. Let's see if I can do it with my, okay, yeah, wrist swing. So I need a little wider arc than a finger swing, and so I've got a wrist swing. The elbow swing was just too loose. It was too loose for this. It wasn't going to work too well. That's what I mean by that. Again, I got this weird thing happening with the paper right through there. That's actually a manufacturing defect. But that's all right. I can work with it. So you learn to deal with that. The more you draw, you're like, this is some funky little. The texture here is different than everywhere else. Like you can see where the screen, they make paper on screens, where the screen had a little funkiness going on with it. But that's okay. A lot of times you can work with that, fill it in. No one's the wiser. No one would know. It's going to look fine. And so, have patience. That's just part of the process. And again, that's part of the one where you have to go, I've got something I don't like. What's happening? Well, it's, that's left this little splotch there that I need to somehow deal with. And so you go and you deal with it. And it doesn't have to be any more, it doesn't have to be any harder than that. Now, I had my 2B pencil. I used my wrist swing, and then I came in with a finger swing, and I was just trying to reestablish some areas where there was a variation in the texture, or there was a line, like there's a line here that needs to be filled in. There's a little space right there that needs to be filled in. A little sort of liney thing right there needs to be filled in. There's a little bit of a line right here that needs to fill in. So that's what I was doing. I was getting in here with my pencil to fill those in as I continue with my drawing. I think I'm going to go ahead with my HB. Yeah, this is my HB. And we're going to go ahead and continue putting our value on. So I think I need some of my dark middle values need to kind of transition a little bit more across the into the light family, maybe just a bit. Yeah, if we're not careful, this will start to look like a dark line that someone's drawn in with a Sharpie marker or something, and that is not the look we're going for. So start at the darkest part with my finger swing, come out a little ways. Start at the darkest part, come out a little ways. Start at the core shadow, come out a little ways. Start at the darkest part, the core shadow, come out a little ways. You know, it's that same sort of thing. And what are we going to do? We're going to repeat it, repeat it, repeat it. Like doing dishes, rinse, repeat, rinse, repeat, rinse, repeat. Hurry, 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 hurry. And that's, you know, whatever. That's the last thing you want is someone on your shoulder going, hurry with the dishes. You're like, get out of here. Do the dishes yourself. You know, whatever. But, so I don't want it to make it seem like it's someone, you know, barking orders over your shoulder. But that's just all we're doing. We're just doing the same thing over and over and over again. Switching up the pencils. Hanging out. Watching our Netflix. Drinking our favorite whatever beverage. Whatever that may be, and just smiling and loving life. And that's what we want to do. That's what is required when you draw. Any less, you know, is you're missing out. You know, that's part of this. You know, this is really meant to be enjoyed, and don't be afraid to. You know, I'm giving you all this technical stuff and all that kind of thing, but. You know, at the end of the day, we want to be, loving this stuff, enjoying this stuff, having fun. I mean, being creative is supposed to be fun. At least that's what it said in the literature I read. Sometimes I think I may have gotten the wrong pamphlet, but overall, I agree that that's the statement. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to begin to make the value in my lighter middle values. So remember, we have dark middle values and we have lighter middle values. So what I'm doing right now is I'm coming over here into my lighter middle values. I've got a 2H pencil. I'm using that tapered stroke, and we're going to continue on making these. Now I'm coming all the way down to kind of, it's like I'm coming down like a scanner, and then I'm coming back up, and then I'm coming down. And that'll help me keep it more linear. It's hard if you do it all the way to there and then another stripe here and a stripe. If you do it like that, you're going to have these rings, and I don't want that. So that's why I'm kind of going down like this little scanner, coming down to here, and now I'm going to come back up, following that straight line, and then I'm going to come up to here, and then I'm going to start to go down. Okay? At least in the very beginning, that's how we're going to do this. Okay? And again, this is starting to have a look of a gradation of value, a gradation of tone. It's looking like what we want. It's starting to look like a cylinder. And so this is that whole thing of working your plan. Like maybe 20 minutes ago, it didn't look like a cylinder so much. But by you know, working my plan, oh, this needs to go middle value. This needs to be, you know, lighter than this or this or this, but it's got to be darker than that, or, you know, that's what we're looking for. So again, okay, so now I've got this getting a little lighter, but I want more of a gradation. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to still kind of work up and down and up and down and up and down wherever I need to give myself a little better gradation. There's also a little bit of a line here. We need to make this sort of, some people will call it bleed, and that just means you need a little bit more of a gradation. So we're going to work right on this edge where the light and shadow meet, and I'm going to try to see if I can get just a little bit more of a gradation right where the light and shadow come together. If we're not careful, again, it'll start to look like a line, and so we need to get that to really be a gradation, so it doesn't look like a line. That's not what we're looking for. That's not what we want. That's not going to be helpful. But again, we can really tell this is our core shadow, which is what we want. We've got, you know, a core shadow, and then we have our dark middle values, like so. So we have our dark middle values, and again, this is starting. There's a gradation that happens on a cylinder, and again, we're just doing this. This is just the idea of a cylinder, but instead of putting a photograph up there, but a well-photographed cylinder, because our eyes actually see more than a photograph can see more than a camera can see. You have to have a really expertly done photograph in order to catch what I'm going to be talking about, and that is, as it goes dark, we have a gradation because of reflected light. It gets lighter, going darker up here, and there's a little bit of dark that starts to crawl, and so there starts to be sort of like this soft sort of triangle as this right along the edge where it gets just a tiny bit darker, and then it quickly gradates out. You know, there's a gradation very quickly, and so that's what we're trying to play with right now. And I need more of a gradation coming down, and I'm going to play with that too. So. But that's what we're working for. That's what we're striving towards, and we're getting really, really close. The hardest parts are done. The ones that take the longest is the dark values, and the shadow family. In the lights, it takes a lot less time, because we don't have to go as dark. With graphite, it really takes time for that graphite to be built up and have a nice dark. Rich darks, as we like to say. They're nice and rich. I think we can make this just a little bit more of a gradation. I think we're getting there. I think it's starting to look really, really nice. I think we need more of a gradation on this side too, so I'm going to work on this side just a little bit. Again, if you're wondering what pencil I've got, I'm using a 2H pencil right now. Okay, and this is actually just a side-to-side stroke. So this is just a regular finger swing. I know I'm working rather fast, but I'm just, again, a regular finger swing. I'm just trying to make it a little bit darker, and right along this edge to that edge. It's just slightly. There's too much of an edge. We need to darken it so it becomes more of a gradation. And I think again, it's starting to do it. We're getting to the point where it's really starting to happen. This is the exciting part. We're like, yeah, all our decisions are now coming together, they're culminating, and they're starting to create the illusion of depth. And I know I've said this before, and I've probably said it on all of these videos, but it's a fleeting illusion. And it can be just a couple minutes between, I don't know that this looks right, to, holy smokes, wow, that's starting to look right. And again, it can be so quick going from, nope, this doesn't look right, to, oh yeah, that's what I want right there. That's looking great, and that's the wild part about it, is that it's just how quickly that can develop. And it's all about having all those form shadows that we wanted in here. And so we have core shadow, dark tone, reflected light, middle value, light tones. As this comes over here, there's going to be some light middle values as this is going to start to it's going to darken as it goes around the corner. So this is going to be getting slightly darker, and then there's going to be a gradation getting lighter. So the edge is going to go slightly darker, and then there's going to be a gradation getting lighter as it comes in. Do I have a 2H pencil here? Yeah, I've got a 2H pencil. I've got to be really careful with this, because again, it's not as forgiving. It's not as forgiving if I have those spaces between the lines. So I've got to really make sure I'm overlapping my previous line. Whoops, there's a big space there. All right, filled it in. So yeah, we want to be really careful with that, because we need a gradation, and we need this to look right. But if we're not careful, we'll start to create all kinds of really rough textures because we're leaving spaces between the lines. So, don't work any faster than you have to. If it takes you 2.5 hours to do this little sphere, not sphere, pardon me, a cylinder, that's fine. And by the way, drawing takes a lot of time. Like I can't do a halfway decent sphere and or cylinder and or cone, you name it, any one of these little shapes. I can't really do a decent one in under, you know, an hour and a half. It takes at least an hour and a half to create the illusion with graphite. There's some techniques we could use to try to, and we have been using the brushing a little bit to help us get to it a little more quickly, and so that has helped shave some of the time off. But there's some other techniques we can use as well that can help us to get and build up values much more quickly. And we'll certainly show those to you. And I do a lot of that with the pair as well, because otherwise it would have just taken, again, 3 times as long. And again, graphite does have a subtlety we can't get any other way, but it's the length of time. It does take, it takes, I think I've told you this, 3 to 4 times as long as to do a charcoal drawing. In the beginning, almost all my students hate charcoal because they're not familiar with it. I mean, they loathe it because it's just it seems so difficult in the beginning. And then once they learn how to do it, all of a sudden it becomes their favorite medium. It's so funny. I don't know anyone that hasn't reversed their decision on that. But almost everyone universally, when they first started, like, oh, this is terrible. I can't stand this. This is the worst medium ever. And then they get, you know, because we're so much more used to a pencil, you know, many times, you know, maybe this is going to be changing here as with the younger and younger generation, but still there's many people that are, you know, in their 20s where, you know, that they were in school and they got a pencil and that was their first thing, was learning how to use that pencil. And so we have a lot of comfort with a pencil, you know, using that pencil because we've used it, and so, you know, in school and stuff. Okay, so this is getting darker, this is getting lighter. Again, we're really starting to create that illusion of being round. And again, what we're wanting is that illusion of being round. And it's really starting to happen. Again, this is so exciting because this is where the illusion really starts to come together. And that's what I want. So again, I've got this gradation here coming in. This has a little bit of value. Darker up here, getting lighter as it comes down because of reflected light. Except that almost obliterated that, so that means my middle values now have to be a little darker up here, so this looks lighter. So again, it's all about the relationships. You know, so this is really starting to have, again, that nice feel. This looks like shadow, this looks like light. This is the exciting part, because again, it's starting to really come together like we'd hoped. Cross my fingers, say a little prayer, all that good stuff. All right, now, so this is really starting to work. The only thing I might do a little bit right now is I could come into here, and again, you know, make this. This is supposed to be darker. The cast shadow is supposed to be darker than the core shadow, so this has to be darker here, then that's lighter there. This thing comes down. This has to be a gradation because that looks like a line. So that means I've got to make this value come out and be the same value as that little, yeah, it looks like a line, but it was just a chunk of value. And so if I do that, if I make it dark, that's all dark, well, it starts to bleed, or it starts to make a gradation that looks like, okay, yeah, this is the cast shadow. So again, I'm using just a 4B pencil, and I'm using finger swings. We're really here where we want to be using a little more. Actually, I'm using a little bit of a wrist swing right there. to cover more area much more quickly. We can come over here and we've got our occlusion shadow where this touches. And our occlusion shadow should be put something down so I can put my hand on it and protect my drawing. So I got my hand on this this pencil. But the occlusion shadow should be dark enough, like should you be able to see it even a little bit into the cast shadow, because the occlusion shadow is darker than even the cast shadow. So that's sort of an important thing. Yeah, we're getting there. So on this top, because of the way the light rays will hit, a lot of times this will have a slight gradation from a little darker on this edge, which pushes that makes this edge look a little lighter. Got to be careful. What am I using? Oh, I'm using a 4B. That's way too dark. I'm going to grab my 2H. And again, we have to be very careful with this. We don't want to go too dark, but it's just a slight gradation going around here, and by this, and there's a little bit again of a gradation right along this edge that pops the edge. It shows the highlight, because the highlight is right next to this little bit of value. And then there's a little bit of value where it goes a little bit, gets a little bit darker at the back. And that's so, again, that the back doesn't try to start to pop forward. If it's lighter back here than it is up here, again, it can start to lift up, do some crazy stuff. And then, as this goes across, there's a gradation where it gets lighter as it comes across here. I'm going to use a 4H because, again, it's hit some rough area. I don't know what, again, that's probably because I let my drawing pads kind of be kicked around the studio a little too much, and so it roughs up the paper. I'm not near as gentle with them as I probably should be. When I'm actually doing drawings, I'll actually grab a little nicer paper. But in the beginning, this is nice enough. This is, again, that Strathmore 300 series. And again, for a beginning artist, that's perfect. That's fine. It's a good enough paper to really sink your teeth into and get a decent drawing. And you can do some really great stuff with it. But if you're like, oh, I want to enter a show, or I want to do a drawing for grandma, or whatever the case may be, a friend of mine, and you want it to last a while, well, you're going to want something besides this paper. Okay, so again, now we're going to do the highlight. Now we've already got where the highlight's starting to show itself. When we brushed this, it brushed value over the whole drawing. And so what I can do is I can take my eraser and pull out some highlight along that edge. Okay, I'm going to grab my other one that I've sanded a tip onto it, and again we'll see if we can just pull just a little bit more. So I think it's a little bit too uniform, too light everywhere. But here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to use this 4H, and I'm going to very softly. There's also like a little dark right there that's just a little too dark. I have to take that out with my kneaded eraser. But I'm gonna sort of reform these when I need to, and I'm gonna make some a little darker and some some will fade a little bit. Then I'm going to do this subtlety with my 4H pencil. All right, so here's what we're going to do next. I'm going to go ahead and take this and just soften, because that's a little too much texture. So I'm just going to see if I can soften it just a little bit with that with that brush, which I think did a pretty good job of that. Now the last thing I need to do, because now this looks darker than this. This is a top plane, this is a side plane, and the side plane needs to be a little darker, a little bit at least. And so I'm going to come along here with a 4H pencil again. Wait, is that? Yeah, it's a 4H. And just a little bit. We got to make sure that this is at least a little bit darker than that right there. And I can also do this, and we can also come in here a little bit with my eraser. And again, I can make a little. I'm making a little beak on here, and we can use it to create basically stippling. Stippling means little dots, but instead of, sometimes people have seen it where you do that, you stipple with a pencil, making dots like that. Well, this we're doing the opposite. We're doing it with our eraser, and by doing that, if we bunch these right, we'll start to get a gradation. So it's a way, again, of making just a very light. I think I'll just stroke that a little bit because I don't want to sit there and take those dots out with a 4H pencil for 4 or 5 days. I'm going to take an HB maybe, see if I can get just a little bit darker here. Okay. Now, I think that's good for our cylinder. So this is going to be fine for the cylinder. That's what we want. I think over here it's gone a little too. Again, this needs to be light, and this needs to go back. This needs to be the darker edge. So again, we could come over here. And make this the darker edge. And so we would come over here, and I'm going to just use a really big finger swing. This is a little rough. This point of the drawing, I would rarely do something this aggressive. But you can see as I start to put, maybe I'll even use an elbow swing. But as I put more value here, hopefully we can see that as this goes darker, the cylinder starts to come forward. It's lighter. Okay? And so stuff like that is, again, really important to the drawing. This is where, again, the rubber meets the road. And this is where, you can spend a lot of time just really nuancing the edges. This is why, again, the drawing takes so long. When I say sometimes, it'd take me about 4 hours to do a really decent one of this, people are like, wait, what? And it's like, well, because I'd be playing these edge games. This needs to be a little brighter. Even this I think needs to be a little brighter. So I'd come over here, and again we'd start to darken the value behind this. So this edge is lighter, and this back here is a little darker. Again, I'm using a wrist swing to do this. And I've actually, again, I don't normally, I wouldn't normally do this on a flat surface, but I've put my one hand, and I'm resting my other hand on top, if you can see that. So that way it allows my wrist to sort of swing a little easier, and that way I can do this a little quicker for you. So again, as this goes darker, this starts to look lighter. And again, this is how, we could come over here, and maybe this is too light now, so we could just put a bit of value over it. This is how we deal with edges. Which edge is supposed to be, darker. This is supposed to be darker here than there. And it doesn't quite look like it. So we would come over here, and we'd make this darker until this looks like it's darker on the right side, further away from the light than it is on the left side, closer to the light. There's a little bit of where it gets lighter right along this edge. Now, you want some of that, but if you're not careful, it'll look like it's iridescing its own light. But there's actually a phenomenon that causes this, and it's the whole idea that one edge goes darker, the other edge looks lighter. So you'll have some of this happen. Some artists will call this passage, meaning the passage of the light behind an object, and this starts to look darker and this starts to look a little lighter. And again, it's very subtle, so you have to make sure that, I'd be playing with this probably for 30 minutes to get this to have just enough of a gradation so it looks natural and doesn't look like a mistake. But you also get a little bit that happens where this goes just a little bit darker and then immediately starts to get lighter. And again, you have to make sure that you handle that really, really, really well, or it won't look right. But this is some of the stuff, and if I wanted to, I could check to see if my lines are straight, and if they're not, I could use a straight edge as a guide to help me, if I wanted to make my value, I could use a piece of paper. I'm using a little level right now, but I could use a piece of paper against there and cover that edge and then put my value right next to it, which will sharpen that edge slightly. Just these little things are going to help the edges. And again, remember, we don't have lines in nature, we have edges, and it's all this little subtle stuff that creates those edges. And that's where the fun really happens when we're making a drawing like this. So I know we spent quite a bit of time on this little cylinder, and this cylinder is not, it's about 4 inches tall, so it's not like it's the shortest cylinder around, but it's not huge either. It's not 6 inches tall or 12 inches tall or 10 inches or something. That would take more time. We'd be doing all the same stuff. It just would take more time to cover a larger area. We might use, if we were doing that, might use graphite sticks and some different things so we can cover more area much more quickly to save time. So again, we've got our drawing here of our cylinder, and we can clearly see. Well, let's see, if I take mine out of focus, this seems the lightest. This then seems middle value, light middle value, dark middle value, core shadow, dark tone, reflected light. And then we also have these two. We have the cast shadow and we have the occlusion shadow where things touch. And if we have this, let's see, so we had also our highlight. I forgot to show the highlight. So by doing this, we have something that has depth, and that's what we want. We want that little feeling of depth we've got happening on this. And so go ahead and give this a shot. Go ahead and try to do the drawing, and think about the values, think about the edges, all that good stuff. And if you do, you'll have something really, really nice. Now, also remember that if you don't know how to draw these core shapes, go back and take the drawing of line class. We talk specifically how to deal with ellipses, how to draw cones, and how to draw cylinders, and better spheres, and boxes, and pyramids, and all that good stuff. But once we know how to do the drawing, well, then we can just do the shading and play with the values. And that's what we were doing here. And again, let's say I was looking at this and this was a little too lackluster. I wanted to bump it. Well, the only way to bump it is either to make this darker, or you can go the other way, or you can do both and make this a little lighter, right? And now, just by that little bit, this jumps out a little bit more, okay? If it's starting to jump too much, like at that back, the back has to go back, so it can't be as contrasty as up here at the front. But all of a sudden, this edge isn't disappearing anymore, just by making this slightly darker and then making this a little bit lighter. Subtle relationships is what makes this work. So go ahead, give this a shot, have some fun, listen to the Netflix or whatever your favorite stuff is, and do the drawing and have a good time, all right? Thank you so much for joining me. We'll see you later.